So I've watched another oldie, um, a romantic one this time, but yeah, it's seriously old. It's 60 years old, so likelihood most of the actors are kaput, unfortunately. So this is how the thing, isn't it? With old movies, all the actors are likely to be dead, unfortunately. Anyway, yeah, it is a romantic one. It's a very strange romantic one. So it's not so. I mean, it's not predictable exactly, which is good usually. I mean, who wants predictability? But I don't know. It's still strange because most of the explicitly romantic stuff happens like in the last 10 minutes or something. I mean, other than that, it's sort of a slow build up. I mean, I suppose it's not bad. It's subtle. I'm talking about The Apartment. It's quite an old one, and I suppose one can sort of see why, on average, it seems to be highly rated. Um, but it's still, I mean, not ideally perfect, is it? Not like, for example, Love Story, which is more about, like in this case, it's I don't know, it's more. I'm not sure. I guess. I mean, this romance is almost incidental, you know. Not like, for example, I mean, yeah, just um, I mean, yeah, sure enough, it's realistic. This can still happen in real life. I'm not saying it cannot, but apart from it, I mean, if I mean, it's on average, it seems clearly it had an effect on people, but didn't resonate that much with me. I mean, if I had to compare it to some of the great romances that I've seen, right? Um, I suppose the one that comes mostly to my mind at first isn't a movie, but it's a series, or it doesn't matter really. I mean, whether it's a series, whether it's animated or not, whether it's a movie, romance is a romance, right? And however it's structured, however the relationship is structured, and how it's built up, and how it moves on, and how it happens. It can also, I mean, proportionally still occur in a movie or a series, you know? Suppose, a romance can be shallow in a series or a movie or whatever. Am I saying this is shallow? I don't know. But yeah, the romance that comes to mind at first is in the initial series between him and Kikyo, and obviously it is actually another strange romance. It's not anything straightforward. It's not realistic either. Obviously, it's a supernatural romance, but it's so much more powerful. I honestly, I don't quite know whether it's because it's a series, so it's built up more slowly. I mean, that does create another effect, but I have still seen movies, so movie length, so film length, that were still powerful. So I'm not saying it's just serious. Um, so yeah, in terms of movies, the romances that I did like were one in Altered State, for example, but it's a very different kind of romance, obviously. So it's actually between, a person who operates lifts and some office, or at least former office worker, probably letter as well. It's obviously all romances are their own thing. So in that case, it's between two scientists, but it's how they develop, I suppose. It's how, I mean, sure, all romances have their drawbacks, hardships and such. Obviously, Romeo and Juliet would be, the most, I think, famous case. But I don't know. This one was a bit strange. I mean, I got to admit, it took me just a bit while to figure out who it was going to be with. I mean, at first it didn't even seem like a romance. It was more of a sort of mild comedy sort of film, and then it began with a bit of chit chat in the lift between someone as a call. So let's begin with a call. So I mean, yeah, I'm not saying anything is wrong with that. All romances begin with trivial matters, really. But then, I mean, the way it developed, throughout, it was still fairly mundane, and still pretty much, he was more like a middleman rather than, uh, a candidate for her own. I mean, she barely showed that she had an interest in him in the first place until, of course, the last 5 minutes or so. It sounds a bit, I don't know. I mean, sure enough, I can see how people will, while watching it, root for her to do what she did at the end. It was quite predictable in a sense. I mean, it wasn't a predictable romance in the sense that, from the very beginning, it wasn't quite predictable as to how this will progress and exactly what happens. And what does happen, which is quite something, I guess. I mean, yeah, all romances have the hardships, and in this case, it was, suppose an attempted thing. But it's not that as such. It's just how it developed. It somehow didn't seem to be very geared towards the romance developing as it did at the end. That somehow the ending seemed very fitted in. So I mean, it was very predictable essentially. Uh, but what came prior, and there was quite a lot prior, 2 hours. Yeah, all of that seemed fairly trivial, and it didn't quite lead up to the last pretty much 5 minutes. So that's the whole movie is 2 hours 5 minutes. So that's they built up to it, and there wasn't that much build up. So I mean, literally all they did, so the crucial part of the romantic sort of route is to play a card game. Now, I don't know in what world, maybe 6 years ago, card games were more romantic, but somehow they don't seem so romantic. I mean, just going around saying queen, gin, whatever, it doesn't seem to be romantic. Just saying, just. Uh, and then on the comedy front, I mean, it was a bit comedic, but they were more like, wry, smile sort of comedy. Not laugh out loud, certainly, but barely any smiles as well. So it wasn't too comedic either. I think it didn't focus too much on either of them, really. So, it was not too comedic, not too romantic, just a drama mainly, but I didn't find it to be a powerful drama either, to be honest. So I cannot quite understand why it's so highly rated. I mean, the only thing I can understand is that people, are overtaken by the last 5 minutes, and they just think they're the best thing ever, and that's it. Most people give it 8, some give it 9, and somehow there we go, a very highly rated romantic movie. I don't quite watch a lot of romantic movies, I got to admit, so I don't quite have a lot to compare it to. But even the ones I did watch, ones like Altered States aren't even very highly rated. Now, the primary thing there isn't even romance, so I guess many people might have watched it for other reasons. Um, but even the romance, in my opinion, is even more powerful, because, I mean, there are still hardships, but somehow it was still geared towards there, at least, and I don't know, just the whole concept here with the apartment, I guess, was quirky enough. So I guess that might have been another factor towards this impression that people, the average audience member, seems to have. But even that didn't seem to be too developed. So I don't know if maybe there aren't too many romantic movies, or alternatively, this is sort of an early one that people were impressed with. So obviously, then you get this thing where since people early on rated it high, although in this case, yeah, IMDb didn't exactly come at the time. I think it was born in 1990, so that's 30 years after the film itself. But I don't know, I guess maybe there's this nostalgia factor, or people have already rated it highly on some other site and then transferred the rating over here. So I don't know. But somehow I can't quite figure it out. I mean, apart from the last 5 minutes, but it seems to be a very light sort of thing to rate highly. And it's not that I criticize it too much. I'm kind of neutral about it, but you know, I, I almost felt some things about it. I almost I, just some situations were sort of almost funny. Some were sort of almost romantic. You could predict it too, very very easily predictable. In terms of the script they use, the repetition of words at the end, for example. The repetition of sentences. So and obviously then even sounds like at the end. When he pops the champagne. Now that's very, for example, very uh, very much cliched, I suppose, and it makes no sense as well. Why would someone on their own on New Year's Eve pop a champagne for the? I mean, just that even if they weren't depressed because they're on their own, um, I don't know. I mean, someone on the road must be really elated to pop a champagne unless, of course, they want to use it to just drink themselves to oblivion. But people don't normally do it with champagne, man. It's not a major complaint, really, about the film. I suppose it's just what it is. But it just adds to the cliche, I think, that was still in the last 5 minutes, and somehow obviously we're supposed to believe. I mean, it was obviously an excuse to make it seem like he shot himself when he didn't. But it's such a cliche. It's dressed up as an excuse. I mean, it's an obvious excuse. I mean, I did think that he shot himself at first. That's what clearly they want the audience to think. But ends up being such an excuse, really. And it's not a good excuse either. It's just a very almost a pathetic excuse. It doesn't really add much in the way of romantic feelings, really. It's just what it is. But it really this all of this adds to it, really, in my opinion. And the rest is sort of similar. I mean, there's a bunch of cliche in a way. Um, it sort of begins almost like Brazil as well. Of course, Brazil, from what I remember, doesn't have a romantic element, but it doesn't quite, have any commentary on the other hand, like Brazil did on the office life as such. The office is only there uh, for the drama element mainly, not so much romance. I mean, this is the thing. So it's not exactly. It is what it is really, here I noticed that apparently when it was first released, it wasn't actually a box office success. So I wonder why. Um, Actually, I am not saying that rightly. No, no, it was. It was. Yeah, it did make a profit. Yes, it did. Never mind. I'm not sure how I misperceived that. So I suppose that's it. Anyway, the audience does love it, but uh, I don't know if it's because of past sort of impressions that people had, or they're still modern. But yeah, it's one of those things, I guess. I mean, like, it does build up this sort of thing. I suppose, like when she stood him up, when they were going to see the Music Man. suppose, yeah, that's where the audience starts to feel sorry for him, obviously with the cold and such. But it's too on the nose, it's too obvious. So that yeah, that then the audience starts to think, maybe yeah, they want them to get together because they couldn't at the beginning. But do they really? I mean, I don't know. I mean, sure, I guess she ended up in this situation where the other guy just wanted her to come with him. But I don't know. It's one of those things. And then and then you know, even the reason for her attempt was a bit, was it an attempt or wasn't it? She didn't. She never even confirmed, and it's not quite the most romantic in my opinion. It's just whatever it is, really. I mean, right now, all it is really at this exact moment is a historic relic, mainly. Seems, just like the language they use is very historic as well in this sense. Um, Old films always have this thing where one really needs to look up words usually because it's all very yeah, and I don't know, there's a lot of weird stuff. I had never even heard of an automat before, for example. Hilariously, I'm not really sure why they went out of business because one would think that automated fast food is something that they want to expand. Somehow they're trying to force out due to some recession they did. Yeah, and I didn't even know that there was a differentiation between person to person operator facilitated calls and by station to station. I had no idea. So it's another thing. But other than that, I mean, it's a very as a film in itself, it's one of those things. I mean, I didn't quite enjoy it per se, but it's not like I didn't enjoy it then. So, it's um, as a comedy, I certainly enjoyed The Great Dictator more, and that's even earlier. That's an even older film, and it's strange as well because I do normally enjoy spoken word comedy more than slapstick. Great Dictator was slapstick mostly, and this was mostly linguistic, but it didn't have as much. It just didn't. What it did have mostly is drama and an attempt at romance, but even that, in my opinion, didn't have much of. The only thing it had really is office drama, pretty much. People complaining that they couldn't take his apartment, and it's a bit strange, isn't it? Like, is this really how people go up the hierarchy in an office by letting out their apartment? A bit of absurd, I think. So I was never aware of such sort of politics in offices before. Maybe it's a thing of the past, so I'm not sure. As a film, though, it didn't quite work, even if you just take that on its own, in my opinion, it didn't quite work. But yeah, this film seems like it was not only just well received by the audience, but by critics as well, which is, I suppose, even rarer than one may think. I think um, it won 3 Oscars apparently, and loads of other awards. Uh, so I don't know. It's one of those things I just happen to have missed. Um, I mean, I suppose some people seem to like it for its romantic elements. Some people think it's comedic. I think my impression is that most people seem to think it is mainly romantic. So yeah, doesn't seem like my opinion is the majority opinion here. Some people seem to say that they got more out of it after multiple viewings. So maybe I could do that in the future at some point and see if I do like it any more. It's one of those things. And there is also another problem with regards to more like what do you call it? Sort of like an ontological problem, um, psychological. Mental. Um, the fact that I watched this from a from a list of highly rated movies. So in my mind, it's already sort of built up. This is the problem. I mean, I could, I guess, just randomly watch movies and not know, and I really try to not be influenced by so much. So I try to block the average rating on IMDb and such for most movies. But of course, there is that main list there, and either I watch them or I don't. Or yeah, sure enough, I do it randomly. But if it's random, then I like to take an eternity to watch them all. So it is sort of a dilemma because I do want to watch them, but then am I prejudicing my mind about them? Because I mean, whatever people rate a movie on average, whether highly or lowly, the mind will have certain expectations. Expectations. But yeah, it doesn't always happen like that. Like I got the Great Dictator from the same list, and before I watched V for Vendetta, I knew it was highly rated as well, and I really loved it. So it doesn't really, I mean, make a difference, I think, mainly. It's not like, I get the list and I'm more likely to rate it as the average rating is. But then, I wonder whether I might go the opposite direction as well. So, maybe I do not like more movies on the list because they are highly rated. Because overall, the more I watch from this list, the more I seem to rate them lowly. But then, I mean, I do still these days seem to think of certain movies at a lower sort of scale. Just I used to rate movies higher anyway before years ago, and now I'm sort of I don't know adjusting to a sort of a deflated sort of thing, So it's not even um, like even this movie I watched recently about the housing market. I mean, that was very thought provoking, as one could say, having talked about it for an hour. But I still didn't. I mean, like it so much that uh, but I mean, I still liked it, just not so much. One of those things. Uh, Obviously, it's not a movie that one likes in the sense that one likes it for its positivity. That's the point. It's not really very positive. Just like I wouldn't, like war movies or other sort of things. So yeah, but obviously, this is the apartment is on the other side of this that sort of spectrum where people by default are more likely to like it because it's sort of a jovial movie essentially. So it does make it even more bizarre that when one doesn't like it as such. Now, I've noticed that apparently people from the past people from the era when this film was made, apparently their main complaint was that it's in quotations, a dirty movie. That was the main complaint apparently that the director and the actors got. I seriously have no qualms about it. Those people must be absolutely scandalized by the kind of movies that come out these days because they thought that was dirty. Yeah, it showed nothing, these days movies show much, much more. No, I judge movies based on how much they fulfill their genres, essentially. I wouldn't have minded if they went into the direction of the comedic premise more, I think. 'Cause it did have comedic potential, but I don't think they really did as much as they could with regards to the comedy. I mean, they could have done more of a, they could have put more awkward situations in it and such. I noticed also this is by the same director and writer as Some Like It Hot. As it happens, that's another highly rated movie that I didn't seem to like that much either. I've watched it some years ago, so I don't quite remember it fully, but it did seem somewhat similarly mildly comedic at best, I think. And obviously, I think there was some attempt at romance as well, but not, it doesn't seem like to be such a focus at all. And at the time I watched it, I thought that maybe people highlighted it because it was a vehicle for Marilyn Monroe. I don't think there's a similar sort of star in this film here, so I don't think that's the issue. But I still don't quite know how maybe people came after Some Like It Hot and thought similarly positive about this movie. Because literally they were released back to back apparently, just 1 year apart or such. And so, I mean, it seems to be a film that really people, earlier I speculated on whether maybe it's people from the past who liked it mainly, but no, seems like it's also currently people, pretty much. Just checked people's opinions, people's current opinions, that is, and yeah, pretty much they do like it. So, it's one of those things. I mean, I do not so much like very much ultraviolet violent films, but then on the other hand, I mean, I don't know. There's some movies that don't do not so much focus on a single genre either. So they're kind of the opposite. I'm not saying this is anything violent. That's not the point. I'm just this is obviously about many other things. But that's the thing. It doesn't seem to focus on many other things either. So it has a bit of suicidal ideation, but doesn't quite focus a lot on that either. Uh, so yeah, it seems to me like it's a mix max, a miscellany of genres, and yet it doesn't quite highlight any one of them, which makes it a bit weak. I mean, many, unless a story is a series, so there's a lot of hours to it, then maybe you could have a lot of genres, and then you focus on one in this episode, one in another episode, and such. But yeah, there was a little bit of most things, and none of them seem to be very strong then in this sense. And so it's sort of like a jack of all trades situation. But otherwise, I can sort of see why people consider it to be some sort of uh, thing to lull about with, to just leave in the background, like some people seem to say they do for some reason. It's not. I mean, it's not a tense movie. It's fairly mild at best. I cannot believe people in the past found it dirty because um, but it still didn't seem too strong to me, at least. The comedy wasn't too strong, unlike the Great Dictator, which somehow even with slapstick, it just seemed much more comedic. I mean, it was much more comedic, and that's 15 years prior. So even I mean, old movies can be funny, but this one wasn't so much, and in my opinion, didn't have a very strong romantic element either. It just had some interesting one-liners, but beyond that, I don't think the one-liners do so much, do they? and this thing with Wise at the end of yeah, that doesn't make a movie for me. I mean, yeah, a lot of repetition mainly what it had. But otherwise, yeah, it's interesting to read what people say. Just in my opinion, not too much.